what I have since learned is if you don't call 911, you may be taking them to the wrong hospital. And had you called 911, the paramedics, they're at your house, they're assessing what's going on, they're in contact with the correct hospital, and the hospital is assembling a stroke team to get to work on your loved one as soon as they get there. So there's no time lost. And time is of the essence when it comes to having a stroke. Welcome to Aging in Style, the podcast dedicated to celebrating aging and what it takes to do it well. I'm Lori Williams. I'm a certified senior advisor and senior housing expert. In each episode, you'll learn stories of older adults who are thriving in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and in some cases in their hundreds. Whether you're an older adult or the child of an older adult, this podcast is filled with insightful resources, organizations that are doing incredible work, and stories that will inspire you to volunteer, learn, and who knows, maybe even skydive in your golden years. Hi, welcome to Aging in Style. I am so glad that you tuned in today. What I'm sharing with y'all is a presentation that I have been doing around my community, and it's getting some really excellent feedback, which I'm excited about because it is obviously a topic that is very near and dear to me. It's about strokes. And if you listen to the podcast regularly, you know that my husband is a stroke survivor. He had 4 strokes beginning Christmas Day 2022, and we've been on quite a journey. And along the way of this journey, I wrote a book that was published in July. It's called Surrounded by Love, One Family's Journey Through Stroke Recovery. And the book is available on Amazon in hardback and paperback and soon to be Audible. So that is coming soon. But so thankful the book has been received quite well. People are sending me messages and they are giving reviews, and it's doing what I wanted it to do, which is to help others not make the mistakes that I made, which I did make a few mistakes along the way, just not knowing any better. And then also just as sort of a guide through any kind of a catastrophic illness for a family member, how to be an advocate and becoming a caregiver, what that looks like and how it turns a family upside down, but how we can come out of it on the other side whole and, not completely stressed out and losing our minds. So what I'm going to share with you, as I said, today is going to be this presentation that I have been doing throughout my community. And I've called it Stroke Smart. And I named it that because I just feel like we all need to be smart about strokes and know this information that I now know. I wish that I had known this before. So it's Stroke Smart, Prevention, Symptoms, and Recovery. Okay. So we start with the strokes, my family stroke story. And I'm just going to kind of give a quick little soundbite about it. If you want to know more, we've covered it on many other podcasts where I've gone into detail and actually recorded the past 2 years kind of in real time of as things were happening and things were constantly changing. But what happened was Christmas Day 2022, 7:00 p.m., we were getting ready to have our dinner, which was late because we had some potatoes that just didn't want to cook. And everything kind of is perfect timing. So it happened that my husband, myself, and our 2 kids, Chris and Abby, were all standing around our kitchen island. And I asked my husband to say the blessing. And he couldn't speak. And that was my first clue that I knew something was wrong. And I've shared this before, but there used to be this commercial, I think it was back in the 80s. And for some reason, every time it came on, I just would freeze and watch it. And it was called Fast. And it was the signs of a stroke. And so that is why, I immediately knew just based on his speech that something was wrong. Everything was fine. Other than that, he could still walk. And all I could think was from the Fast commercial is get him to the doctor, to the hospital fast. And what I should have done was called 911. And I'll go more into that. But I put him in my car and I took him to the closest hospital, which was very close, but they were not a hospital equipped to work with strokes. So he had to be medically transported by, it's called Care Flight here in Texas, but he was transported to another hospital that could handle his strokes. And, he was admitted in ICU. A couple of days later, he had 3 more strokes. So we went from perfectly normal, nothing unusual about our family, to mild stroke. and told he would be fine in a year or so, to catastrophic stroke, permanent disability, and rehab after rehab. He lived in rehab for 7 months. He's home. We've been through all kinds of rehab. He's still getting rehab. We have caregivers, and I have been in this role of advocate and caregiver for almost 2 years. So that's kind of the synopsis of what was going on. So in my mind, after all that I've been through, I just feel that everyone needs to be stroke smart. And my mission, along with senior living and aging, which are my passions, are also teaching people about stroke prevention. I was shocked when I learned that 80% of strokes are preventable. And that's a statistic that comes from the CDC. 80% are preventable. My gosh, if we could have prevented this, I mean, I would do anything to go back and be able to prevent this and what my husband has gone through, what our family has gone through. Strokes are the 5th leading cause of death and a leading cause of serious long-term disability. I mean, just let those facts sink in. I feel like myself and other people I've talked to, when we thought about a stroke, we thought about, someone who maybe had a stroke, but then they were fine, or they needed a cane or something. We didn't think about paralysis, not being able to speak, all the other things that can happen with a severe stroke. So I just want to get across how serious a stroke can be. So I think it's important to know the signs of stroke. And as I mentioned earlier, the commercial from the 80s, FAST, that always stayed in my mind. They've updated it. So now it's Be Fast. And this is what it stands for. B is balance loss. These are things you're looking for if you suspect someone is having a stroke. E is eyesight change. F is face drooping. A is arm weakness. S is speech difficulty. And T is time to call 911. It's not put them in your car and drive to the emergency room. So please learn from my mistake, call 911. What I have since learned is if you don't call 911, you may be taking them to the wrong hospital. And had you called 911, they're in contact. The paramedics, they're at your house, they're assessing what's going on, they're in contact with the correct hospital, and the hospital is assembling a stroke team to get to work on your loved one as soon as they get there. So there's no time lost. And time is of the essence when it comes to having a stroke. So what is a stroke? A stroke or a CVA or a cerebrovascular accident, it causes permanent damage to the brain by interrupting blood supply. And I want to just emphasize permanent, because I don't think I actually had realized that until I was faced with looking at a scan of my husband's brain, as the neurologist showed me 4 little white spots on his brain where he said, those areas are basically gone now. Those are destroyed. That is brain damage. And so when you kind of have that in your face, it's sort of like a shocking moment to realize that. So there are 2 types of strokes. There's ischemic, which is the most common. About 87% are this type. And this happens when a blood clot or a piece of plaque blocks a blood vessel supplying blood to your brain. You may have heard of the clotbuster drug, tenecteplase. If you get to the hospital quick enough, they can give you this injection, which my husband did get after his first stroke, and it breaks up the clot, and he was doing great after that stroke. Unfortunately, we would have had a good outcome if that had been all that had happened. But unfortunately, in our case, or my husband's case, 2 days later, he had plaque that broke off and caused 3 more strokes, or a stroke shower, as they call it. The other type of a stroke is hemorrhagic, and that's bleeding in the brain, and causes could include high blood pressure, aneurysm, or some sort of vascular malformation. It's important to know the 2 different types of strokes, but of course, ischemic is going to be the most common stroke that occurs. So damage caused by strokes. It's funny working in healthcare as I have, and working with so many older people who've had strokes, that I really didn't think about strokes that much. And maybe that's pretty normal, that most people don't sit around just thinking about a stroke and what kind of damage occurs after a stroke. But of course, now that is on my mind 24/7. So the type of damages that can be caused by a stroke are physical. The person could have weakness, paralysis on one side. They could have problems with their balance, coordination, grip. Speech is another one, aphasia, which affects how you communicate. A person with aphasia may have trouble understanding, speaking, writing, reading. Apraxia is another speech communication disorder. It's an inability to translate conscious speech plans into motor plans, which results in limited and difficult speech. I will tell you, my husband has both the physical, which is his right-sided paralysis. His right arm does not move, his right leg. We've just through intense therapy, he is able to walk some, but he unfortunately has both the aphasia and the apraxia of speech, which are very, very difficult because he unfortunately knows what he wants to say, but he can't say it. Strokes can also cause vision damage, blurred or double vision, loss of field of vision. A lot of times after a stroke, someone may have loss of, like Mark had loss of peripheral vision, which has mostly come back over time. Memory loss, there's an increased risk of that with vascular dementia. Also, something, fun fact, nobody told me until it actually happened was you are at a higher risk for seizures. And Mark now has a seizure disorder due to strokes. And let me tell you, seeing someone have a stroke is awful, but seeing someone have a major seizure is the worst thing I've ever seen. So here's the good news. I mean, there is recovery after stroke, and that's because our brain has something called neuroplasticity. And I love saying that word, and I did not know that word prior to having to go through all this, but neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to reroute around the damaged areas. And how do you create these detours of rerouting around? Like I said, when I looked at my husband's scan and saw these 4 white dots on the scan of his brain, those are areas that no longer connect. We have to find ways to go around so that we can get back some speech, we can get back movement, all of the things. And how you do that is through lots and lots and lots of repetition, through physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, I would say even music therapy. They have done so many therapies on Mark, and I am so very thankful that he has received as much therapy as he has. And I realize that we're quite fortunate, which I've shared this before in other podcasts, that in Texas, there is some sort of a brain injury mandate. So he has had to continue getting therapy. It's been paid for by insurance. Things will change a bit when he has to go on Medicare, because Medicare doesn't cover this intense neuro rehab, which is an unfortunate thing. But he has had lots and lots of great therapy, and through all of these different disciplines, as I said, physical therapy, speech, and occupational. You will be told, and I remember while he was in the hospital, I was, of course, Googling everything, as most people would, Googling strokes, Googling recovery, and okay, people have had 4 strokes and completely recovered, so maybe he will, just trying to cling to the positive. And everyone will tell you, you will see the majority of improvement in the first 6 months. And yes, I mean, that is true. You do see most recovery, but there will be people who tell you, oh, after a year, you're not going to see anything. And that is not true. And that's what I want people to know, is that improvement can occur even years later if you continue doing therapy. And that's a message I want to share with people, is just to never give up. And we celebrate in our family every win that Mark has, no matter how small it is. If he said coffee one day, oh my gosh, we are dancing around and cheering because the appropriate word came out for what he wanted. He was able to convey and communicate a wish to us. And here, we're almost 2 years into this. His occupational therapist has actually got him to move his thumb and his pointer finger together. So he's still making progress. And that's, I feel, a message that everyone needs to know, this, not to give up. And I also want to add this. I don't think that I know I am not this brave, and I am not as strong as he is to watch him go through the therapy and how much he's had to put into it, the pain. It's very painful because your body, think about this, your body, you're like walking maybe, but you're in a totally unnatural position, which is pulling everything else out of whack. So you're having pain. It's awful to have to witness, but I'm so proud of him for being so strong and continuing almost 2 years later to do this rehab. So yay, Mark. So that's why I want to celebrate the wins. I say be positive. It's a difficult, challenging thing, but always embrace the positive and celebrate all the wins and believe that there's always a possibility for some improvement. You just have to throw everything you have at it, do the work, do the therapy, and celebrate every win. Stroke prevention is the key. And like I said earlier, to learn that 80% of strokes are preventable, that kind of stays on repeat in my mind, that this could have been prevented. But, I can't kick myself or kick him because we didn't know. And hindsight's 2020, things that I wish we had done different. I'm sure things that Mark wishes he had done different, but this is where we are. This is our pathway. And so I feel like by doing this presentation, by sharing on the podcast, by sharing in the book, maybe we'll save someone else from having to go through what we have. So strokes can occur at any age. Okay, so you need to know that. I was doing this presentation recently and a young man raised his hand. He said he had a stroke at 31. Now he is recovered and he has taken the steps to prevent having another one, but they can happen at any age. It's not just older people. Mark was 62, which I still don't consider old. He was 62 when he had a stroke. Risk goes up after the age of 65. Now, we have risk factors that we can't control, like our age. We can't control that. But there are some risk factors that you can control. And the two biggest ones, and I tell people this all the time, know your numbers. Blood pressure. The normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. If you're looking at a 180 or something crazy, you need to go get that checked out. If you need to be on blood pressure medication, do it. High cholesterol, again, know your numbers. And for these, for blood pressure and cholesterol, be sure you're having your annual physical and talk to your doctor about any concerns. Follow up. Don't be, that ostrich with your head in the sand, just thinking, I'm fine. Nothing's going to happen. Because, why do that? Why not just take care of your health and prevent what you can? Smoking, if you smoke, I'm just going to tell you right now, don't. Because 58.8% of stroke survivors in the U.S. were smokers. I don't think it's worth it. Diabetes, keeping your diabetes under control. Physical inactivity. We all need to move. And you know what? I'm talking to myself here too. I'm not the greatest at getting out and exercising, but we all need to move in any way that we can. That is what's going to keep us healthy. Watching our diet. And then sleep apnea. That is another huge one. And I will tell you this, Mark does have sleep apnea and he refused to wear the contraption thing. He said it was too uncomfortable. So if someone has told you that you are snoring loudly or have kind of do that stop breathing between snores, go get a sleep study done and find out. If you have sleep apnea, just get the machine. I think I'd find a way to sleep with it to be able to avoid having a stroke. And people I've talked to in doing this, I just ask people, because a lot of people have sleep apnea and they've all told me that it took it took a minute to get used to the contraption you have to wear, but they get much better sleep now. And good sleep is tied to good health. Okay. I also talk in the book, kind of switching gears a little bit, is finding yourself in the midst of that catastrophic event. The event that's not going to happen to you, that would happen to someone else. It's like, how can I put it? I was functioning like I was doing everything I needed to do. But if you ask me something, like people were asking me, what can I do? I literally could not put a thought together. I was just doing everything I could to make sure Mark was getting the care he needed. My kids were okay. That, I was trying to figure out what was going to come next for Mark. I could not form a thought on, what you could do for me. And so people, neighbors, friends, family, people were, coming to me, how can we help? What can we do? And all I could think to say was just pray. And thankfully, they all jumped in and did stuff. And this is something I shared in the book and I've shared on the podcast because I think it's so important. If you run across a family in crisis like this, in a catastrophic event, these are some things that you can do to help them. Set up a meal train. That's what they did for us. And it was the best thing ever. And I could not have even formulated that thought to say, hey, how about meals? I mean, it just was not, it seems so simple, right? But when you're in shock, basically, and just realizing your entire life has just turned upside down and the person you love most in the world may not make it. I mean, it's tough stuff. So provide a meal or a gift card for a meal. People gave us Uber Eats and whatever the other one is. There's another one I can't think of, but they gave us gift cards to order meals. Send a get well card or a thinking of you card. Once Mark got to rehab, he loves, as most people know, we have a golden retriever. She is our therapy, emotional support, just, favorite member of the family. We all are in love with this dog. So everyone started sending Mark cards with golden retrievers, and they just brightened his day, made him so happy. Another thought, and people did, they offered to walk our dog, but my son was there, and so we didn't need that. But had our son not been there, and I was at the hospital the whole time, yes, the poor dog would have needed to be fed and walked and taken care of. So that's what a wonderful thing to offer to help someone with. Set up a fundraiser or a GoFundMe, and talk to the person first if they're open to it, because it was one of those things that we got hit with huge, huge bills that were not covered by insurance. And so when my friends came to me and said, we'd like to do this, I had to think about it for a minute, but then I said, yeah, let's go ahead and do it, because, it was a lot. So see if it's something they would be open to. Gift a massage. I love massages, and it was such a beautiful thing that people gave me gift cards for massages, and I was able to take advantage of those. And just to have that stress relief was wonderful. Fix things around the house. And as I tell everyone, the first year after Mark's stroke, seriously, everything in my house broke. And I learned how through YouTube to fix 3 toilet issues. Just found myself using tools that I had never even, seen before. But anyhow, our neighbors came through and offered to help. And, that was huge. We had just recently something broke on our fence, and neighbors came right down and fixed it for us. And then, of course, to me, I don't know if you're a religious or spiritual person, whatever, you do you. But for me, prayer was huge. And that I feel got our family through quite a bit. And then once, you have a catastrophic event like this, find yourself, especially if you're the spouse in this type of situation, maybe you're the child and your mom or dad had a catastrophic event, whatever it may be. Now you're the caregiver. And being the caregiver is a hard place to be. It's not easy. And this is what I tell people all the time. Don't compare your caregiving situation to others. You need to own it. Being a caregiver is hard. Is the hardest thing you'll ever do. And never discount your feelings. They're valid and real. And you're going to think things that you're going to be like, oh gosh, I'm a terrible person. No one else would think that. Yeah, I bet you they did. And I put some of those in the book because I think it was important to be real and transparent that, we're human. We're going to have these thoughts. We're going to have these feelings as we are processing what has happened to our life. So it's okay. It's all okay. And when I say don't compare your caregiving situation to others is because I got into a situation where I was on a Wives of Stroke Survivors Facebook page. And I would see stories that would break your heart. People who, they were young, they had little kids, like preschoolers, a baby, their husband had a stroke, they didn't work, they have no resources, no help, no money. And I'm just like, my gosh, it's so much worse. I can't be complaining. But you know what? That is an awful situation, but my situation's awful too, and your situation's awful. We can't compare it and think, well, it would be worse if this is bad. Just own it and just know it's bad. And this sounds kind of weird unless you've been through this. You don't want to get stuck in, thinking, oh, this is just so bad, but you have to process through all these feelings and not just sit there going, oh, this is okay. It's not so bad. I'm okay. Because I did that. And that's when you get in a little bit of trouble. So it is okay to scream and yell. And I mean, not at the person, of course, but like in your garage, in your car, to your best friend, your safe person, it's okay. So some of my tips for the caregiver, once you are now in this role, is use a meal delivery service. Because like for me, I'm still running a business. I'm trying to take care of my husband. Cooking, not high on my list of priorities. I don't mind cooking, but at this point in life, to go to the store, come up with a plan to cook. So, I mean, the whole thing, it just seems overwhelming and just too much. So we use a meal delivery service. There's also grocery delivery services and pharmacy delivery services, all these things that can help you, especially if you can't leave your loved one. So Mark, we can't leave him by himself at all. So someone always has to be there. And it's usually me or our son, Chris, who is an angel. And Chris, thankfully, does our grocery shopping. He goes to Sam's. He will do whatever. He is like a wonderful, wonderful young man. He's 28 years old, and he is just, I honestly don't know what we would do without him. We also have a caregiver who comes a couple of days a week to help out as well. Hiring a caregiver is very expensive. It's not something that we can, personally afford at this point. I mean, I have a kid in college still too. Also, if the person that you are caring for is not yet retirement age and you're trying to get Social Security disability, I always tell people about this website that was given to me by one of the social workers. It's allsup, ALLSUP.com. Go there. They were able to help us in our situation. Mark was able to be approved for his Social Security disability within 6 months. We had to wait 3 months post-stroke because they had to see, if he was going to improve where he would not be, qualified for disability, which unfortunately he did not. And then we had to have lots and lots of paperwork. They guide you through it. And we had to get a lot of information from the doctors and the therapist and submit all of that. But he was approved 3 months after that. So it was a total of 6 months. So 3 months post-stroke, we could apply. They came back, asked me a few more questions, and then it was approved 3 months later, and we were getting his check, which is, that helps a lot to cover a lot of these medical bills and caregiving and the things that we need. The other big tip for caregivers is create me time for yourself. Do not lose yourself. You need to, and I know it's hard when you're in the midst of it, and I'm going to tell you it's going to get easier because it has been. When all this first started, I had a really hard time figuring out how to not feel guilty, carving out some time for me, but it's important. You have to take care of yourself because you don't want to get sick. You are the one holding everything together. So as I said, the goal of writing the book and doing this presentation that I have been doing to my community is to just share an awareness and prevention of stroke, for people to learn how to advocate for a loved one who may be going through a catastrophic illness, whether it's a stroke or something else or an accident. They need you. They need someone to be their advocate. And then also to show support of our caregivers and help with different tips. So I just wanted to share that about strokes and what I'm doing with my Stroke Smart program that came from my mind. And I thought, let's try this. But if you're in the Dallas area, so I'm happy to come and do a presentation for you. I could also present it over Zoom. If you'd like to share this information with a group, I'm happy to do that. Because like I said, I really want to get the word out there on stroke prevention. And of course, you can buy the book, which is on Amazon. And it's, like I said, it's hardcover, paperback, Kindle, and we have Audible coming soon as well. So I appreciate y'all tuning in as always. Please visit my website if you want more information or want to see how to order the book. It's LoriWilliams-seniorservices.com. And be sure to follow podcasts so you'll always get our podcasts when they come on every Friday as they do. And do share them with your friends and family. And you just never know who this information may help or who you don't know that they need this and they need the information. So please do share it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. Hi, thank you for listening. Navigating care for a loved one who's a stroke survivor can be totally overwhelming. Yes, the internet is free and there's a ton of information out there, but also your time is valuable. That's why I wrote my book, Surrounded by Love, One Family's Journey Through Stroke Recovery. In the book, I document everything that I've learned and wish someone had told me about while I was navigating the first months of stroke recovery with my husband, Mark. It's available now on Amazon and all other online book retailers. There's also a link in the show notes that you can click to get your own copy.